What if I told you that the food you've always heard is good for your eyes might not be the food you should be thinking about first? Because as you get older, you may start noticing little changes. You walk into a dark room and your eyes take longer to adjust. Headlights at night seem brighter than they used to. You squint at small print, and suddenly your phone feels easier to read when you hold it just a little farther away. Most people hear this and immediately think, I need more carrots. But here's the part most people never hear. Your eyes depend on a very specific group of nutrients, and some of the richest food sources are probably not the ones you would expect. In fact, I'm going to show you 3 foods that stand out for very different reasons. Number 3 is a tiny dark berry that researchers have actually studied for its potential connection to night vision and dark adaptation. Number 2 is a bright orange vegetable whose pigments can accumulate in the macula, the part of your retina responsible for sharp central vision. But number 1, this is where things get really interesting, because the food at the top of this list isn't a berry, it isn't spinach, it isn't a carrot, and it probably isn't something you would normally put in the same sentence as eye health. Yet, it contains an extraordinary amount of a nutrient. Your visual system literally needs to function normally, and there's an important catch. With this particular food, more is definitely not better. So stay with me, because by the time we reach number 1, you may look at your plate and your idea of foods for your eyes completely differently. Let's start with number 3, blackcurrants. Blackcurrants are one of those fruits that most people rarely think about when they hear the words eye health. But there's something about this little berry that makes it especially interesting. And it starts with something many people notice as they get older. Have you ever walked from a brightly lit room into darkness and suddenly felt like your eyes needed more time than they used to? You wait, you blink, you look around, and for a few moments, everything seems unusually dark before your vision finally begins to settle. That process is called dark adaptation. Your eyes adjusting so you can see when the amount of available light drops, and researchers have been interested in whether certain compounds found in blackcurrants might influence this process. Here's where the story gets interesting. Blackcurrants are naturally loaded with anthocyanins, the deep purple-red plant pigments responsible for their intense color. These compounds have antioxidant properties, and scientists have been studying them for their potential effects on visual function. But instead of simply looking at what happened in a laboratory, researchers actually tested blackcurrant anthocyanins in people in a double-blind, placebo-controlled crossover study. Healthy adults received different amounts of blackcurrant anthocyanins before researchers tested their ability to adapt to darkness. And at the highest dose tested, 50 milligrams, the researchers found a statistically significant improvement in the dark adaptation threshold compared with baseline. The study also reported improvements in certain measures of visual fatigue following visual display work. Now, this is where we need to keep the finding in perspective. It doesn't mean blackcurrants can suddenly give you night vision. It doesn't mean they can reverse damaged eyesight. What it does mean is more interesting and much more realistic. A naturally occurring compound in this tiny berry has actually been studied in humans for its relationship with a specific aspect of visual function. And blackcurrants aren't interesting only because of anthocyanins. They also provide vitamin C along with other naturally occurring plant compounds. So you're not relying on one isolated nutrient. You're getting a small package of different compounds from the whole food itself. And you don't need to make this complicated. If you can find fresh or frozen blackcurrants, Try adding them to plain yogurt, oatmeal, or a smoothie. And if fresh blackcurrants are difficult to find where you live, an unsweetened blackcurrant product can be another option. Just pay attention to the label, because some blackcurrant juices, syrups, and dried products can contain quite a bit of added sugar. Now let's move to number 2, and this one might surprise you, because when most people hear foods for healthy eyes, they usually think of carrots, spinach, or kale, but there's another colorful vegetable that deserves a little more attention, especially as you get older: orange bell pepper. And here's what makes it interesting. That bright orange color isn't just making your plate look beautiful, it's a clue. Hidden behind that color are carotenoids, including zeaxanthin, one of the pigments your eyes naturally concentrate in a very important part of the retina, the macula. Think about everything your central vision allows you to do. Read the morning newspaper, recognize your grandchildren's faces, see the numbers on your phone, read a road sign while driving. Those tiny details all depend heavily on the health of your central vision. And that's one reason the nutrients concentrated in the macula become increasingly interesting as we age. Your macula naturally contains 2 important carotenoids, lutein and zeaxanthin. They form part of the macular pigment, where they contribute to the eye's natural antioxidant and light-filtering defenses. And because your body relies heavily on dietary sources for these carotenoids, the foods you regularly eat can help supply them. Now, you might be thinking, if we're talking about lutein and zeaxanthin, shouldn't I just eat spinach? Spinach and kale are certainly excellent choices, but here's the surprising part. Researchers have looked beyond leafy greens and compared the carotenoid content of different fruits and vegetables. In one analysis published in the British Journal of Ophthalmology, scientists examined 33 different fruits and vegetables for their lutein and zeaxanthin content. And one vegetable stood out: orange pepper. Among the vegetables tested, zeaxanthin accounted for about 37% of its carotenoids. That's a surprisingly high proportion. And suddenly, that bright orange color starts to look a little different. It's not just color, it's a clue to the plant compounds inside. And there's one more simple trick that can make this food even more useful. Carotenoids such as zeaxanthin are fat soluble. So having some dietary fat alongside carotenoid-rich vegetables can help your body absorb them. And you don't need an elaborate recipe. Take half an orange bell pepper and slice it into crunchy strips. Drizzle over a little extra virgin olive oil. Add a squeeze of fresh lemon. Then finish with a light sprinkle of black pepper. That's it. You can also pair orange pepper with avocado, hummus made with tahini, or a small handful of nuts. Now we've reached number 1. And honestly, this may be the last food you expected to see at the top of a list for healthier eyes. Because when people think about eye health, they usually picture carrots, spinach, berries, or other colorful fruits and vegetables. But number 1 is completely different: beef liver. And there's a very specific reason it earned this spot. Beef liver is exceptionally rich in preformed vitamin A. And vitamin A isn't simply a nutrient that happens to be associated with eye health. Your eyes actually use vitamin A as part of the machinery of vision. Every time light enters your eye, your retina has to convert that light into signals that your brain can understand. One important part of that process involves a light-sensitive protein called rhodopsin. And here's the fascinating part. Vitamin A is required to make rhodopsin. So we're not talking about a vague connection between a vitamin and your eyesight. We're talking about a nutrient that plays a direct role in the visual cycle. That allows the retina to respond to light. And that's one reason vitamin A has such an important place in discussions about vision. But here's where beef liver becomes especially interesting. You don't need a large serving to get a lot of vitamin A. In fact, liver isn't a food you should think about eating every day. A relatively small portion can provide an exceptionally large amount of preformed vitamin A compared with many ordinary foods. And because preformed vitamin A can be stored in the body, more isn't automatically better. That's why moderation matters. For most people, liver makes much more sense as an occasional, small portion within an otherwise varied diet, not as something to eat every day. And vitamin A isn't the only nutrient beef liver provides. It also contains B vitamins, copper, iron, and other micronutrients involved in normal body functions. But when we're specifically talking about the eyes, vitamin A is the headline nutrient.